The celebrated professor stood tall at the podium, his booming laughter echoing through the lecture hall as he held up the crumbling manuscript. "A grocery list," he declared, his tone dripping with contempt. "Our humble librarian here believes this to be a key to the Holy Grail." Students snickered, colleagues smirked, and the librarian quiet. Bespectacled Elias Ward lowered his eyes, cheeks flushed. The humiliation was public, deliberate, and cruel. What the professor didn't know was that Elias had already seen something that none of them had. Words buried within the ink that had survived centuries. A secret script meant only for eyes patient enough to read beyond the obvious. Elias's fingers had trembled the night he first spotted the faint underlining, a whisper of faded Latin no scholar had bothered to notice. It wasn't mere coincidence, his entire life had prepared him for that moment. Years before he was a librarian, Elias had trained as a medieval paleographer under his late father, a man dismissed as a dreamer and ridiculed for chasing the myths of the Grail. Elias remembered those nights vividly. The smell of candle wax, his father's voice urging him to read with silence, and you'll hear the page speak. Though Elias never admitted it, his father's disgrace in academic circles haunted him, a wound he carried in silence. Now, decades later, as Professor Aldous Crane smirked before the crowd, Elias knew he had stumbled upon the chance his father never had. "They only see the surface," Elias thought, gripping the edge of his seat. "But the page has another voice." His heart pounded. He dared not speak the truth, not here, not in front of the vultures eager to laugh again. Yet the manuscript's secret burned within him. Beneath ordinary ink lay a map, its coordinates disguised as liturgical notations. Crane's arrogance was legendary. Once, he had humiliated a doctoral candidate so badly that she fled academia entirely. To him, scholarship was theater, and students his adoring audience. Elias was nothing but a stage prop, a reminder that humility belonged to servants, not to men of power. "The Grail," Crane scoffed, his voice booming again, "is a tale for dreamers and drunks, and this," he shook the fragile parchment, "is a recipe for broth." The room erupted in laughter. Elias felt heat rise in his chest. For a fleeting second, he imagined standing, seizing the manuscript back, and shouting the truth, "It is no recipe. It is the road you've been blind to all your life." But fear held him still. His hands tightened into fists under the desk. "Patience," he told himself. "Father was mocked, but I will not falter. Let them laugh." Later that night, Elias returned to the library's silent archives. Alone, beneath the dim lamp, he traced the ink with a magnifying glass. There it was, again, tiny marginal notes, symbols carved in patterns that aligned with constellations. His pulse quickened. He whispered aloud, as though speaking to his father's ghost, "You were right." The words tasted of vindication and sorrow. The manuscript was not merely written. It was engineered layers of meaning, designed to mislead the arrogant, while revealing itself only to the patient. A hidden skill of Elias's surfaced then. His gift for cryptology, learned in secret military service during his youth. A chapter of his life he had buried away. Years before he ever became a librarian, Elias had cracked codes for intelligence officers. The memory of those days surged back as his eyes darted across the page. "This isn't chance," he thought, his mind sharpening like a blade. "This was meant to be read by someone like me." As the candle burned lower, Elias realized the truth that made his heart thunder. The manuscript carried the first verifiable clue to the Grail's resting place. And in that moment, fear turned to resolve. He would follow its trail, not for fame, not for glory, but to restore his father's honor and silence men like Crane forever. If you're enjoying this story of justice and hidden strength, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to find out how a simple act of prejudice turned into the most valuable lesson of Professor Aldous Crane's life. Elias closed the manuscript gently, whispering, "Tomorrow I begin." Yet he didn't notice the shadow at the window, the faint outline of a man who had followed him from the lecture hall, watching, waiting. Elias's hands shook as he opened the manuscript again the next evening, this time with deliberate care. The library was empty, its silence broken only by the occasional groan of the old wooden beams. Outside, the world was oblivious. Inside, centuries of secrets pressed against the fragile parchment. He leaned closer, adjusting the magnifying lens. And there they were, lines of ink, so faint, they seemed almost like shadows of words, rather than words themselves. Symbols curved into fish-like shapes, a hidden alphabet buried beneath layers of hymns. His breath caught. Chiro. No, not quite, he murmured, tracing the strange letters. They weren't random. They belonged to a coded system, designed to mimic liturgical chants, but when rearranged, pointed toward something else entirely. For anyone untrained, it was gibberish. For Elias, it was a whisper from the past, a voice asking to be heard. He remembered his father again, bent over their kitchen table with a stack of photocopied manuscripts, insisting that monks often embedded secret messages in prayers. As a boy, Elias had rolled his eyes. Now, he felt the sting of shame. His father hadn't been deluded, he'd been ahead of his time. Elias blinked hard, fighting the wave of emotion. I wish you could see this, father, he thought. I wish you knew your ridicule wasn't in vain. His heart accelerated as the symbols began forming a sequence. When rearranged, they created coordinates, numbers interlaced with psalms. He jotted them down, each digit heavy with implication. The numbers aligned with constellations known to medieval astronomers. They built the map into the stars, Elias whispered, astonished. It wasn't simply a code. It was a riddle linking heaven and earth, belief and geography. The revelation sent a chill through him. If he was right, the markings were pointing to a location in southern France, not far from old Templar roots. His mind buzzed with possibilities. Could the Grail truly have been hidden, where knights once roamed? The thought both thrilled and terrified him. But behind the exhilaration lingered fear. What if Crane suspects? Elias thought, picturing the professor's sneering face. He remembered the silhouette in the window from the night before. Had it been real, or was his mind simply weaving paranoia from shadows? His gut told him otherwise. Someone had been watching. The librarian pressed his palm to the page, grounding himself. Stay calm. Stay quiet. They cannot laugh at what they do not know. Yet even as he said it, he knew silence could not last. The manuscript was a magnet for ambition. And ambition was the one thing Aldous Crane had in excess. At that very moment, in a different part of the city, Crane sat in his opulent study, swirling a glass of wine. He replayed the scene in the lecture hall with smug satisfaction. Public humiliation was his sport, and Elias Ward had been an easy target. But Crane was not a fool. He had seen the librarian's reaction, the flicker of something in Elias's eyes when he looked at the manuscript. That wasn't the look of a beaten man. That was the look of someone hiding knowledge. Crane leaned back, smirking to himself. You found something, haven't you, Elias? He muttered aloud. The thought gnawed at him. He couldn't let some lowly librarian uncover a prize that had eluded scholars for centuries. No, if there was treasure buried in that parchment, it would belong to him. Back in the library, Elias worked feverishly, piecing together more symbols. Each one deepened his conviction. He could almost feel the manuscript breathing with history, urging him onward. Yet his stomach twisted with unease. What if the Grail wasn't meant to be found? What if his father had been destroyed not because he was wrong, but because he came too close? The lamp sputtered, casting long shadows across the shelves. Elias felt the weight of eyes again, unseen but undeniable. He turned sharply, but the aisles stood empty. Still his pulse raced. His mind whispered, they will come for it. They will come for you. And yet, as his quill scratched the coordinates onto parchment, determination drowned out fear. Elias inhaled deeply, whispering, so be it. If this is the path, I'll walk it. What he did not realize was that Aldous Crane had already bribed a student assistant for after-hours access to the library. And that night, as Elias locked the manuscript away in its case, a different key, turned in the outer door. Professor Aldous Crane entered the library with the swagger of a man convinced that rules bent themselves in his presence. His polished shoes clicked against the marble floor, echoing in the vast emptiness. He had dismissed the night guard with a casual lie about urgent academic duties, his silver tongue lubricated by the authority of his name. In his hand gleamed a duplicate key procured through a careless student, desperate for approval. Crane smirked. Knowledge was power, and power always bent to those bold enough to seize it. The manuscript sat waiting, caged in its glass case like a beast subdued. Crane approached it with a mixture of contempt and hunger. A recipe for broth, he murmured to himself, recalling the laughter he'd provoked days earlier. But now he whispered with unease, then why did Ward's eyes burn like that? He leaned closer, the overhead lights gleaming against the case. Beneath his arrogance, an unfamiliar emotion stirred. Doubt. At that same hour, Elias sat in his modest apartment, hunched over his notes. His small table was littered with parchment scraps, sketches of constellations, and hastily scribbled translations. Exhaustion pulled at his eyelids, yet his spirit blazed. He whispered to the empty room, "You see, Father, they all mocked you, but the Grail has always been there, waiting." The memory of his father's gentle voice carried him, a mixture of comfort and grief. Elias had never sought recognition. He sought redemption for a name long dragged through the mud. But he wasn't naive. Elias knew Crane's ridicule would not end with laughter. He had noticed the man's calculating eyes. The professor ridiculed to disarm, to strip defenses before striking. Elias's stomach nodded. He won't leave it alone, he thought. He'll come for it. And in that moment, an uneasy clarity settled over him. He wasn't just deciphering history anymore. He was stepping into a battle. Back in the library, Crane unlocked the case. The click sharp and satisfying. He slid the manuscript out with trembling fingers. For all his pomp, there was reverence in the way he touched it, as though even arrogance bowed before something this old. He laid it flat and traced the faded lines. At first, he saw nothing but prayers. He frowned. His eyes darted, growing impatient. "What did you see, Ward? What trick did you use?" The thought of the librarian enraged him. Crane's career was built on the demolition of others, crushing students, belittling peers, all to remain the undisputed authority. The idea that Elias Ward, a nobody tucked among dusty shelves, might hold a key to glory was intolerable. "I will expose him," Crane muttered. "I will prove he's deluded. And if there is something here," his mouth twisted into a smile, "then it will be mine." Yet the page resisted him. The symbols swirled like taunts, offering no clarity. His frustration mounted. He slammed his fist against the table, his voice echoing. "Damn it!" The sound startled him. In the silence that followed, Crane felt something rare: vulnerability. For the first time, he wondered if Elias possessed a skill he did not. Meanwhile, Elias's candle sputtered. His weary eyes scanned the coordinates again. He sketched a crude map, connecting stars with trembling lines. A cross-like symbol emerged, centered on an ancient abbey long abandoned. His heart thudded. He could see it, the path, the hiding place, the truth. And in that fragile moment of discovery, he imagined Crane's sneer dissolving. He could almost hear the professor's voice breaking, stripped of its arrogance. Elias closed his eyes and thought, "Justice. That will be justice." Back at the library, Crane slammed the manuscript shut, seething. He would not admit defeat. He would tail Elias, draw from his progress, then snatch the reward at the moment of triumph. His lips curled. "Let the little librarian dig," he whispered. "When he unearths the treasure, I'll be standing behind him." As he returned the manuscript to its case, footsteps creaked in the hallway. Crane froze, then quickly adjusted his coat, adopting his mask of authority. A guard entered, blinking. "Professor? At this hour?" Crane chuckled smoothly. Duty to knowledge never sleeps. The guard nodded, too intimidated to press further. Crane left the library, already plotting his next move. And so, One man carried the manuscript secret in his notes, while another carried a plan to steal both the secret and the glory. The night divided them, yet bound them in a looming collision. Neither could escape. The following morning, Elias awoke with a restless energy. The coordinates danced in his mind, refusing to be ignored. He packed a small satchel with essentials: a notebook, quill, a compass, and a worn leather journal that had belonged to his father. Every step toward the door felt heavier than the last, the weight of centuries pressing against him. The manuscript's map was not merely geographical. It was moral, spiritual, and historical, all at once. And he understood that following it would demand courage beyond the ordinary. Outside, the world seemed indifferent, the streets calm and sunlit, as if mocking the storm brewing in Elias's heart. He walked swiftly, avoiding the lecture hall, knowing full well that Crane's shadow would trail him. The professor's obsession with recognition and triumph was a force as palpable as any physical barrier. Elias imagined Crane's mind, scheming and plotting, already anticipating every move he might make. The thought tightened his chest. The manuscript's map led him to an old abbey in southern France, forgotten by time and cloaked in ivy. Its stones were cold, and the silence inside carried a weight of centuries. Elias's fingers traced the worn carvings on the entrance arch, and he recognized them from his studies. Symbols of the Templar order, markers of secrecy, and warnings woven into beauty. The thrill of discovery was immediate and electric. Yet beneath it lingered an unease, the feeling that he was being watched. He crouched over the first set of ruins, aligning the coordinates with the patterns carved in stone. A hidden latch revealed itself under a weathered engraving, a sunburst entwined with a serpent. Elias's heart raced. "So clever," he whispered. "They thought no one would notice." Each small discovery deepened his conviction, and his internal monologue grew urgent. Father was right. Patience, observation, and reverence, these are the keys. From the shadows, Crane observed, concealed behind crumbling walls, his eyes glittered with greed. Yet a spark of frustration burned as he saw Elias move with precision, patience, and quiet authority. Every small action, the placement of hands, the tilt of the head, the careful reading of symbols, mocked Crane's hasty arrogance. He had assumed he could seize glory in a single, dramatic sweep, but the librarian's methodical work exposed his impatience and arrogance. Elias reached a small chamber, concealed behind a sliding stone panel. The air was cool, damp with history. Inside, ancient relics lay untouched. Ceremonial chalices, dusty parchments, and stone carvings that pulsed with the weight of legend. His pulse quickened as he stepped carefully, mindful of traps and the moral responsibility of touching something sacred. The manuscript had led him here, yes, but intuition, ethics, and a sense of reverence guided his steps even more. The deeper Elias explored, the more the revelation became clear. The Grail was not merely a vessel or an object of wealth. It was a repository of knowledge, encoded wisdom, preserved by those who valued humility over power. The moral stakes were enormous. To misuse this discovery would be to betray centuries of guardianship. This is why they hid it, Elias thought. Because the world is too often led by arrogance, not understanding. Meanwhile, Crane's frustration escalated. He whispered threats to the empty air, imagining the treasures within reach. Yet out of his grasp, every careful motion Elias made seemed a personal affront. Crane had underestimated the librarian's combination of intellect, patience, and reverence. And worse, he recognized, in the depth of his pride, that if Elias succeeded, the narrative of history itself would shift under the weight of the librarian's insight. In that hidden chamber, Elias paused. The final symbol from the manuscript glimmered faintly under the flickering light of his lantern, a cross intersected by a series of lines forming a pattern he hadn't seen until now. It was not just a location. It was a moral puzzle, challenging him to prove worthiness, humility, and intelligence. He knelt, tracing the pattern with a quivering hand, understanding that this moment was more than discovery, it was judgment. And outside, the shadow of Aldous Crane remained, a silent witness to both brilliance and impending confrontation. The collision of ambition and integrity was imminent, and neither man could retreat from the inevitability of what the chamber would reveal. Crane followed silently, weaving through the overgrown paths of the Abbey grounds. Each careful step of Elias's, each methodical inspection of stonework, gnawed at his pride. The professor's mind raced with schemes. If I move too soon, he will see me. If I wait, he may discover it first. But I am Aldous Crane, no one outsmarts me. Yet, for the first time, Crane felt the gnawing tension of uncertainty, a feeling unfamiliar and unwelcome. Inside the chamber, Elias paused before a carved stone pedestal. His fingers brushed the surface, revealing another hidden compartment. The manuscript's clues had been precise, guiding him step by step, but the final lock required something more than knowledge. It demanded judgment. Elias exhaled slowly, centering himself. Years of quiet study, secret training in cryptography, and the lessons of patience his father had instilled were converging. This is the test, he thought, not of strength, but of integrity. From the shadows, Crane's impatience grew. He crept closer, every nerve alight, eyes fixated on the librarian. He whispered a plan to himself, a reckless scheme. Distract Elias, seize the artifact, claim glory. But hesitation pricked at him. He realized the subtlety required to navigate the hidden locks, the ethical precision the chamber demanded skills he lacked. His arrogance was a liability here. Elias's hand traced the last set of symbols, each motion deliberate, almost reverent. He recalled a lesson from his father. Power belongs to those who respect it, not to those who grasp it blindly. As he aligned the final markings, a soft click resonated, and the hidden compartment shifted, revealing an intricately crafted relic, a chalice, its surface engraved with celestial maps and coded inscriptions. The room seemed to hum with quiet authority, a history of guardianship palpable in the air. Crane's breath caught. The treasure was real, far beyond what he had imagined. Yet it was Elias who stood in the center, calm, steady, eyes wide with both awe and responsibility. Crane clenched his fists. He has earned it, and I am powerless to claim it without disgrace. Anger surged, but beneath it, a grudging acknowledgement. The librarian had succeeded where Crane's arrogance would have failed. Elias carefully lifted the chalice, examining every intricate detail. The inscriptions were not merely decorative, they contained historical records, coordinates to other hidden sites, and moral teachings encoded by centuries of protectors. He understood the full weight of his discovery. It was not wealth, but wisdom, preserved for those who could value it properly. His mind raced, already plotting how to preserve it, how to use this knowledge to honor his father's legacy. Suddenly, Crane stepped forward, his shadow falling over the relic. "Step aside, Ward," he demanded, voice tight with suppressed fury. "That belongs to me now." Elias looked up calmly, his eyes steady. "No, Professor. This has never been yours to claim. It was hidden from men like you, who seek glory without understanding." The words cut deeper than any insult Crane had ever suffered. A tense silence filled the chamber. Crane lunged, reckless in his ambition, but the floor shifted subtly beneath him, revealing a hidden pit designed to protect the chalice. His heart pounded as he stumbled, saved only by the careful observation Elias had noted. The librarian's composure, his foresight, and his quiet brilliance had neutralized the threat without confrontation. Crane's face flushed with rage and disbelief. He had been outmatched not by brute force, but by intellect, patience, and morality. Elias stood, holding the chalice with reverent hands, embodying the quiet strength that the professor had mocked. The moral of centuries whispered through the chamber. Arrogance blinds, humility guides, and integrity wins, where power and greed fail. Outside, the Abbey remained silent, ancient walls bearing witness to the clash of ambition and virtue. Elias knew the path ahead would demand discretion, protection, and careful study. Crane, for all his pride, was left to reckon with the lesson he had ignored for so long. Elias sat cross-legged on the cold stone floor, the chalice resting in front of him, its weight both physical and symbolic. The room smelled of centuries-old dust and incense that had long since faded, yet the air vibrated with the quiet power of secrets long protected. He traced his fingers across the inscriptions, reading aloud the coded wisdom of the Templars, their voices echoing in the silence, lessons of courage, sacrifice, and moral discernment. Every line was a challenge, testing not only intellect but character. Crane lurked at the edge of the chamber, seething with a mix of envy and awe. He had expected triumph, dominance, a moment of vindication over a man he had ridiculed. Instead, he faced a reality he could neither control nor deny. The chalice was more than treasure. It was a repository of ethics and intelligence encoded for guardians, and it had chosen Elias, the underestimated librarian, as its worthy steward. Elias closed his eyes, recalling the trials his father had endured. His thoughts wandered to the young librarian he had once been, timid, doubting, and painfully aware of the scorn heaped upon him. Every ridicule, every condescending glance had been a preparation. The manuscript, the map, the hidden chamber, they were only tools. The true test had always been internal. Strength of character is the key, he whispered. A series of subtle mechanisms within the chamber required him to make choices, each a moral puzzle. One path offered immediate access to ancient artifacts with potential fame. Another demanded patience and restraint, leading to the chalice and the encoded wisdom. Elias hesitated briefly, then followed the path of patience. Every step reinforced the lesson he had learned since childhood, that true reward comes to those who act with integrity, not ambition. Crane, growing impatient, moved closer, ignoring the subtle warnings etched into the floor. His arrogance blinded him to the intricate traps and moral checks embedded by the original guardians. He reached for a small artifact, and a hidden stone shifted beneath his hand, sending him tumbling into a shallow pit. Pain and humiliation coursed through him as he struggled to rise. Elias watched, unflinching, his internal monologue calm. This is the consequence of pride. Knowledge without humility is dangerous. In the pit, Crane cursed silently, realizing that the chamber itself was designed not merely to protect the relic, but to enforce moral justice. He understood, too late, that he had underestimated the librarian's preparation, patience, and foresight. Every obstacle that had delayed him now stood as a monument to Elias's integrity. Elias knelt beside the chalice, carefully removing a parchment tucked within. The encoded maps inside pointed to other locations of significance, hidden archives, relics, and manuscripts preserved for those who could wield knowledge responsibly. He marveled at the foresight of the Templars, who had entrusted centuries of wisdom to those capable of understanding its deeper meaning. His mind raced with possibilities. How to preserve this, how to use it to educate, enlighten, and honor those who had protected it. The librarian's reflection was interrupted by Crane's voice, strained and bitter from the pit. You've done it, he spat. You weren't supposed to succeed. Elias's eyes met Crane's, calm and unwavering. I succeeded because I respected the path, Professor, because I sought understanding, not glory. That is why you failed. The contrast could not have been clearer. One man's arrogance, thwarted by his own impatience, the other's quiet humility, rewarded by centuries of careful design. The chamber, silent and observing, seemed to approve, its guardian's wisdom alive in the choices made. Elias knew that his journey had only just begun. The Grail was not simply a relic, but a lesson in courage, patience, and moral strength. Crane struggled to his feet, defeated not by strength but by integrity. Elias, carrying the chalice, walked toward the chamber's exit, aware that history would remember this night not as a tale of treasure, but as a testament to the enduring power of humility over arrogance. The chamber ahead glimmered faintly in the lantern light, revealing a final sanctuary, a room that seemed untouched by time. Elias stepped carefully, each footfall measured, aware that even the slightest misstep could trigger hidden mechanisms designed to protect what lay within. The air was thick with the scent of old stone, ink, and the faint hint of incense that had lingered for centuries. This was the heart of the Templars' legacy, the culmination of every secret the manuscript had hinted at. He approached a pedestal at the center, its surface carved with intricate designs depicting celestial maps intertwined with cryptic inscriptions. Every mark seemed to pulse with meaning, a silent testament to the intelligence and moral foresight of the monks who had safeguarded it. Elias felt a thrill of reverence. The chamber was not merely a hiding place, it was a moral crucible, testing patience, insight, and ethical discernment. Crane emerged from the shadows, his breath ragged, his arrogance simmering beneath a mask of forced composure. "Step aside, Ward," he barked, voice strained. "This ends now. That chalice, the manuscript, it belongs to me." Elias turned calmly, eyes steady. "It has never belonged to you, Professor. You sought it for glory, not understanding. This is the reward for those who respect knowledge and humility." Crane sneered, but there was a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. He had underestimated the complexity of the chamber, the moral precision required to navigate it. The moment he moved impulsively toward the pedestal, hidden triggers responded, a subtle shift in the floor beneath him, a mechanical click, and he barely caught himself before falling. The chamber had judged him, as it had been designed to do. Elias's expression remained serene. "Power without patience is weakness," he murmured internally. The chalice, resting atop the pedestal, was more than a vessel. It contained encoded wisdom, historical records, and the key to other hidden Templar sites. Elias understood the significance instantly. The Grail was not merely an artifact of legend. It was a repository of knowledge, a guide for those capable of interpreting and protecting it. He reached for it carefully, tracing the celestial inscriptions and whispering prayers of gratitude for the centuries of guardians who had preserved this treasure. Crane, realizing that brute force and cunning alone would not grant him access, faltered. Elias had anticipated every move, every temptation, every potential act of greed. The professor's frustration boiled over. "You're just a librarian," he shouted. "You're not worthy of this discovery." Elias met his gaze, calm and unyielding. "Worthiness is earned through patience, respect, and understanding, not through arrogance, Professor. That is why you will leave empty-handed." Elias lifted the chalice, its weight both tangible and symbolic. He could feel the centuries of history vibrating through the metal, the inked manuscripts, the carvings, all converging in this single moment of discovery. His mind raced with the implications, the preservation of knowledge, the ethical responsibility, the hidden archives waiting to be revealed to those capable of stewardship. Crane's defeat was silent, but absolute. His arrogance had blinded him to the chamber's moral tests, to the subtle lessons hidden within the Templars' design. Elias, carrying the chalice, understood the profound truth. The Grail was never about wealth or fame. It was about wisdom, virtue, and the quiet triumph of integrity over hubris. As Elias exited the chamber, the first light of dawn filtered through the ruins, illuminating both the relic and the path forward. Crane lingered in the shadows, a bitter witness to the triumph of a man he had dismissed, unaware that the real power of the Grail was not in possession, but in the understanding and humility required to earn it. Weeks later, Elias returned to his modest library, the chalice safely encased and the manuscript carefully preserved. The Abbey and its hidden chamber were sealed once more, their secrets entrusted to someone who would honor them. Word of the discovery spread cautiously, but Elias shared only fragments, ensuring the knowledge's integrity remained intact. He had no desire for fame. His father's memory and the centuries of guardianship mattered far more than public acclaim. Professor Crane's career, by contrast, had begun a quiet descent. Colleagues noted his uncharacteristic bitterness, whispered about his failure to secure the Grail, and the audacity of a librarian outshining a seasoned scholar. Crane's pride had been his undoing, and the academic world, often cruel and competitive, had a way of letting hubris unravel reputations faster than misfortune ever could. The moral clarity of the chamber had achieved what Elias could not by words alone. Elias spent his days cataloging the manuscript's encoded maps, cross-referencing with other historical records, and gradually piecing together a network of Templar knowledge scattered across Europe. Each discovery reinforced the lesson he had internalized long ago. Humility and patience were as crucial as intelligence. He trained assistants carefully, teaching them not only to decode, but to respect the wisdom contained within. He became a quiet guardian, the kind his father would have admired, balancing secrecy with the ethical dissemination of knowledge. In the evenings, Elias often paused by the window, reflecting on how narrowly he had escaped public humiliation and Crane's scheming. He thought of the night in the lecture hall, the professor's laughter, and the doubt that had once threatened to suffocate him. Those memories now served as a reminder of the stakes and the resilience required to navigate a world quick to dismiss the humble. Every smile of victory he allowed himself was tempered by the understanding that true triumph was invisible to the impatient and arrogant. Meanwhile, Crane sat in his study, brooding over his own downfall. He had underestimated the quiet strength of humility and the meticulous intellect of someone society overlooked. Every plan he had concocted, every scheme to seize glory, had been neutralized, not by force, but by integrity and insight. For Crane, there was no manuscript to consult, no secret to exploit, only the bitter recognition that pride, unchecked, was a trap. Months passed, and Elias received occasional letters from scholars seeking guidance, unaware of the full truth. He offered mentorship cautiously, guiding those capable of understanding the delicate balance between curiosity and respect. Each student reminded him of his younger self, underestimated, diligent, and silently brilliant. The legacy he preserved was more than historical, it was a lesson, etched into the lives of those willing to learn. On a quiet afternoon, Elias placed a protective cover over the chalice. He whispered to it, almost as if speaking to the spirits of the guardians who had concealed it for centuries. I will honor your trust. I will carry your wisdom forward. He knew the Grail's true value lay not in possession, but in reverence, patience, and the courage to act rightly when confronted with temptation. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the library, the story concluded not with fanfare, but with moral clarity. Elias had proven that knowledge and virtue could prevail over arrogance, that humility could unlock mysteries, and that the quietest individuals often wielded the greatest power. In the annals of history, it would be a footnote to some, but to those who understood, it was a testament to the enduring lesson. Integrity outshines ambition, patience triumphs over haste, and the unassuming heart often guides the greatest discoveries. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel to discover more stories about how extraordinary people turn humiliation into triumph.